Welcome back, everyone. And this time we're not going to actually start with the reading because, hey, we know that this is the Sunday before Easter, and we should all know the significance of Easter and the significance of Passover and the significance of celebrating this season. And we should all be able to understand the importance of our faith and God's love with this particular season. This is the one season that, or the one point in Jesus Christ's life that is the most trackable. The reason why it is the most trackable is because of Passover. We know that Jesus grew up in a Jewish family. We know that that was the faith that, or the faith that Jesus Christ followed. That was the rules they grew up with. They were all based on Judaism. And with that, we know that he was arrested at the end of the Last Supper. That Last Supper was the Seder supper of Passover. We also know that it was Judas who turned him in to the Romans, and what made it significant, that the reasons why the Romans had arrested him is because the Jewish authorities couldn't arrest him. The reason why they couldn't arrest him is it's simply put, it was Passover. That the Jewish authorities weren't after sundown weren't allowed to do any work. So they relied on their Roman counterparts to do the task that they didn't want to do. You see, the thing is they wanted the Romans to arrest Jesus because they wanted to appear like we're still the good citizens, and that, see, we're not trying to drive you out of our land, the land of, as it was referred to then, Israel, Canaan, Judea. We're not trying to drive you out of this land. We're being good citizens, and we're going to allow you to stay here because you won the land from us. We are allowing your occupation to continue. Now, some of the significance to that is that when we look at today's history, go back to 1945. That the land that Jesus Christ walked on is now once again occupied by colonists. And that was one of the things that was being spoken loudly about, and the colonization of of what we call now the Middle East. The reason why Judas did what he did is because, like others in that area, and we see that in today's history, they just wanted to have their land be free for them to use and settle the way they wanted to. They didn't want the Romans telling them how to use their land. And as the story of Judas unfolds, he was a zealot, or what we call, we have changed the term in English to zealot, but meaning an extremist. But that's who Judas was. He wanted the Romans out of the land at whatever the cost was. And there was while there was a problem with what he was thinking, that he wasn't truly understanding until after he had done what he had done. After he had his friend arrested, shortly in the prayer garden, after the Last Supper, which was, of course, the Passover Seder supper. It finally dawned on Judas what he had done, and what Jesus was actually preaching. Jesus was preaching love and tolerance. He was preaching that the Roman occupation was temporary. It would leave. Eventually they would go. And that we just allow them to travel through. Allow time to march forward with love and with tolerance, and all things would pass on. And the people who belong there would remain there. Nonviolence. He wanted nonviolence. He didn't want to take up a sword against them. And that was the things that the zealots wanted. They wanted action. They wanted to see something happening right now. They wanted the land free, and they were going to take a sword and do it. And Judas, being caught between the two ways of thinking, thought that Jesus, at the right given point, because of his humanity, would take a sword and fight against the Romans and not be arrested. He thought that by pushing him to a certain brink, that he could get him to be the sword-wielding leader that he wanted him to be. And this is where the story for Judas turns really, really bad, because he allows his friend to be arrested. He turns him in, and he doesn't feel loved anymore. He allows the guilt, and because he held hatred, he allowed the guilt of that hatred to build up in his heart. And at some point, he stopped listening to God. When he realized what he had done, because his heart was empty, and he realized that his friend was about to be executed, crucified on a cross. When he found out all these things were happening, and that Jesus did not take the sword and go and fight back, and that he had received payment and reward for turning his friend in, his friend that he loved deeper than even you could love your own brother. They had traveled together. They had spent many years together at this point. They had, let's put it this way, it's a harsh land to travel by foot. And they traveled it by foot. And they traveled it preaching to people about love and about who God was, and how on the political front of how nonviolence could actually work. Just keep praying, and to keep their minds open, keep their hearts open to God's love. And the guidance would come After all, especially when we look at some of the stories, God led them out of Egypt. God led them how many places until they could find their own freedom, their own land. God led them through all that. And if they held faith, God would lead them through what was happening to them with the Romans. And that's what Jesus Christ was preaching in the last years of his life. You don't need to take the sword. We just need to follow our traditions. And follow our traditions in secret if we have to, but follow them. Do all the things that God taught us to do, and do them from our hearts with love. And God will take care of those who want to do us harm. God will lead us through all of the adversity. This is at the core of what Jesus Christ taught. He taught us that we weren't any better than anyone else, even though we're different. We look different. He taught us that God loved our enemies as well as he may have loved us. Because we're all human beings and we shouldn't be fighting each other. We're all God's children and that we shouldn't be fighting each other. We should be learning from each other and joining together to be one with each other. This is what God wanted us to learn. He sent us his son so we could learn the ways around war, how to talk our way out of the fighting with the sword. You see, when we fight with the sword, somebody walks away, the other person doesn't. One person gets hurt, maimed, and killed. The other person gets hurt, maimed, and lives. There are no winners in conflict. There are only losers. Is what he was trying to teach us. And this is the time of year when our faith should be the deepest, when the celebrations of God leading us, leading the Jewish and the Israeli people away from the enslavement of the Egyptians. That celebration that happens this week should be screaming loudly to us about how we need to find peaceful ways of settling our differences. We should pray on that and pray every day that God, you give us the ability to endure and be peaceful. That you give us the strength not to simply fight back with the sword, but to talk our way out of a situation without using the sword. To talk our way to resolutions among countries. To talk our way to resolutions without firing a shot, taking a sword, or maiming each other. When we fill ourselves with your Spirit as you have given it to us, we don't need to have a sword. We only need to have your faith. At times you become the sword, the arrow, or the spear. You become, in more modern times, the gun or the missile. Because we put our faith into you, and to you, you shall keep us safe and well. Amen.